Former Steelers safety Ryan Clark popped things off on ESPN comparing George Pickens to Justin Jefferson, but a former teammate of Justin Jefferson, who's on the Pittsburgh Steelers, defended George Pickens. We'll get into the minutia of that, as well as talking about the progress of the Steelers secondary and how they should deploy it, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined by Mike DeFabo from The Athletic. It's going to be a fun episode. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And as I said before, we're joined by Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. He's back on the show. It's been a little bit, but we got him back here after another long day at training camp. But it wasn't what happened at training camp that was sparking up the most fire on Wednesday. It was what happened in ESPN studios as former Steeler Ryan Clark started popping off about George Pickens, and he compared him to Justin Jefferson and saying that George Pickens is more talented than Justin Jefferson. Now, let's provide full context of this so people understand where we're going with this. This was the quote that Ryan Clark said on ESPN. He said, "I'm going to say this as an LSU guy, talk about another LSU guy in Justin Jefferson, comparing him to a Georgian guy in Pickens." He said, "Pickens is much more talented than Justin Jefferson, but Justin Jefferson understands playing everything at the position from stems to leverage to catching the ball. He's a savant. But here's the other thing. Coach Tomlin told me something that I thought was great. He said they didn't even work to tolerate him," that being George Pickens, saying they certainly didn't try to raise him at Georgia. They didn't embrace who George Pickens is. And I get the sense that what's happening here, Mike, is that Ryan Clark's argument, without going too further into into it with his own quote, is he's saying that George Pickens is a lot more raw than Justin Jefferson, but the ceiling could be higher there. Do you buy in on this?
It's tough for me to agree with Ryan Clark in this instance, and I'll tell you why. George Pickens, if you look at his stats last season, he had 52 receptions for 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. Let me tell you what Justin Jefferson did as a rookie. 88 receptions for 1,400 yards and 7 touchdowns. So in last season, Justin Jefferson, that was just his rookie year. Last year, Justin Jefferson had 1,800 yards. So what you're saying is George Pickens is a mere 1,000 yards away from being like Justin Jefferson. Now, I can certainly hear the argument that in terms of raw talent and potential, that 5 years from now, we could say, yes, Justin Jefferson and George Pickens belong in the same conversation. But right now, the truth of the matter is we're not at that point yet. And George Pickens has not proved himself in this league. He has showed promise, and there's reasons for optimism. But until he goes out there and performs like Justin Jefferson, I feel like this is something that we're just talking about in training camp, so Ryan Clark has something to say on television. But like the fact of the matter is, right now, tomorrow, if you gave me Justin Jefferson or George Pickens, I would pick Justin Jefferson every day of the week.
You know, Ryan Clark is a proud LSU guy. He's a Tiger. But he should have gone to Florida, because he's really a Gator, as in an instigator, because that's all he's doing here. He's looking to pick fights because, like you said, that's what ESPN's here to do. They're here to create these headlines. So all that happened, you saw it on Twitter. Vikings fans are popping off at Steelers fans. Steelers fans are popping off at Vikings fans. And I'm sitting here just like, hey, I just quoted Patrick Peterson, how he responded to that, because Patrick Peterson was a teammate of Justin Jefferson just last year. And all that aside, what you say makes the most sense. Justin Jefferson might be the best receiver in football right now. He's putting up ridiculous numbers. Now, I would say a reasonable counter would be that George Pickens' rookie year was with a rookie quarterback in an offense that was still developing and all that. But let's work with what we have. If you want to say that George Pickens has the potential to maybe be a better receiver because of his ability to control his body in the air and the way that he makes spectacular catches, fine. But let's just be sensible and just admit that Justin Jefferson is a better receiver right now. Now, down the line, sure, fine. When we get there, we get there. But at this point in time, it's the case. But I will say, I thought Patrick Peterson provided better context to this discussion with the way that he addressed it. Here was Patrick Peterson after practice on Wednesday when we asked him about Ryan Clark's comments.
That he believes George Pickens has much more talent than Justin Jefferson. I'm just curious your reaction to that.
I mean, I can see it. I definitely can see it. GP is very, very raw. You know, he's very raw. He's very unpredictable when the ball is coming his way, as far as his catch ability. On my podcast the other day on All Things Covered, I call his hands magnet, because if the ball coming anywhere near him, he finds a way to come down with a catch. But Justin is a savant of the position. Like he's really, really in tuned in how to manipulate the defensive back, how to set his routes up. And, you know, he's going into year 4. GP's going into year 2. There's still some things that he wants to, you know, get better at. But the talent, I probably have to agree with Ryan on that one.
All right, thanks.
So there you have it right there. It's funny. Both Patrick Peterson and Ryan Clark used the same word about Justin Jefferson in calling him a savant of his position, meaning this guy is extremely detailed in his work. And George Pickens, I think we can all agree, last year, the raw flashes that we saw of when he made a ridiculous catch, and even in training camp, what he's done is like, man, that guy has a lot of talent. And if that was Ryan Clark's overall point, I think he could have tempered it back a little bit in explaining, hey, I think that there are things that George Pickens can do with his raw talent that Justin Jefferson can't do. But if we are making an honest comparison of themselves, you would take Justin Jefferson because he is that savant right now. Not that George Pickens can't become that guy, but right now, that is who Justin Jefferson has become.
Right. Justin Jefferson's just a more polished, more complete receiver at this stage. Now, There's nothing to say that George Pickens can't become that. And so my 2 questions would be, number one, how much does George Pickens develop? And along those lines, how much does he develop as a route runner? How much does he develop his route tree? Because so many of his passes and so many of his highlights came on the deep ball. But can he be more than just that guy that you bomb it to downfield and he has the crazy catch radius to pull down every 50-50 ball? Is he the guy that can work all the routes and like Patrick Peterson is alluding to, be a professional route runner that sets you up with the ways that he does things? And then the second thing is, it goes back to the second part of Mike Tomlin's quote, where he was talking about what they did with him at Georgia and how they developed him and how they utilized him. That's going to continue to be a question going forward in Matt Canada's offense this year. And we've been told things and we've seen things that suggest that they're going to do more with George Pickens and more with Kenny Pickett to highlight George Pickens. But until they go out and do those things, then it's more, basically it's just speculation and you're predicting and projecting. And so I don't want to squash anybody who's a Steelers fan's hopes and dreams of George Pickens. By the end of this year, this conversation could be very different. But right now, until George Pickens goes out and proves that he belongs in the same category, I think that he still has a long ways to go to kind of enter that discussion.
I agree. I think I just wanted to start this show off by addressing this because I know that a lot of Steelers fans are out there. There's some barking back and forth because there's some people that are saying, "Hey, this isn't. We're not saying that he's better right now, but we're just saying at this stage, like there is a potential, there is a rawness there that everyone is excited about." So, wanted to provide some context to this discussion. Let's talk about some things that actually matter here in a second. And we're going to focus a lot on the secondary because we also talked to Patrick Peterson about the secondary, not just about what Ryan Clark says on ESPN. We also talked to Minkah Fitzpatrick, so 2 major players in the Steelers secondary. We're going to have clips from both of them on today's show. Stick with us as we get to them in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. But first, before we do any of that, I want to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at Nutrafol. You don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health anymore because Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair with no drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician formulated natural science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free patented technology provides consistent reliable results without compromising your sexual health. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all capital letters, all one word, LOCKEDONNFL. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men. Enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Mike, breaking things down here, let's actually slip into some secondary talk here. And I thought it was interesting, some of the things that we heard from both Patrick Peterson and Minkah Fitzpatrick. Peterson, of course, the new addition to the Steelers defense, but the elder statesman of the defense, coming in after pretty much a Hall of Fame career leading up to his joining the Steelers. And of course, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who is the best player in the Steelers secondary, who might be in the middle of building a Hall of Fame career here. But I thought it was interesting to hear about how each of them viewed the progress of the secondary. I want to start with Patrick Peterson and how he talked about how the group is growing, what they've been working on, and how they've been trying to work together, and how they fit Joey Porter Jr. into all that. Here's Patrick Peterson talking about the Steelers secondary after Wednesday's practice.
Just continue to get my feet wet in the different positions. I feel very comfortable, in those positions now. Just all about getting those reps in the game, getting those reps, against another opponent, So it's very, very interesting so far, but I'm having a time of my life because this is the first time in my career that I've been able to move all around the field.
What's the level of communication like? I mean, with new guys, with you and Keanu, and how's that gelling or coming together through the practices you had so far?
Yeah, it's getting better and better each and every time we step out on the field. The good thing is that we have so many guys with experience, so that understands how important communication is post and pre-snap. So the communication is definitely getting better. I don't know how much time we would get together out on in the preseason together, but we'll have to wait and see. But I will say the communication is definitely where it needs to be.
What have you seen from Joey in the time you've been able to watch him?
Man, Joey is he's going to be a guy that's going to be a cornerstone in this defense someday. He still has a lot to learn, but I have no doubt that he'll be more than prepared when his number is called. He's just coming back off an injury. I don't really necessarily know what the injury was, but today was his first day really getting back into the thick of things. Made a couple plays. Still some things that we need to clean up, but he's taking a step in the right direction.
What's the dialogue like between you two, in between reps, in between series?
Man, we talking all the time. We're watching film, watching technique, how we can get better. We're going through minor things before walkthrough, doing things on the sideline. Just kind of always have dialogue with him to help him be able to self-correct himself as quickly as he can, because Monday is a little bit too late. You want to be able to correct it on the sideline and be able to move on from it.
So there you have it there from Mike, from Patrick Peterson, talking about the progress there. The secondary was the one group we really didn't see at all in the first preseason game. Levi Wallace played 3 snaps. Peterson, Porter, Fitzpatrick, KZ, Neal, all of them sat for different reasons in that game. From what you've seen at training camp, what do you see this secondary? How do you see this secondary gelling so far as becoming a unit that can make plays on the ball?
Well, it's interesting that you say that we didn't see them during the preseason, because we actually have not seen all of them together at training camp very much at all. Because if you remember, Minkah Fitzpatrick missed some time with a personal matter. KZ got nicked up. Keanu Neal got nicked up. So there's a lot of talk about how much they would use a 3 safety package this year. And for a big portion of training camp, none of the 3 safeties were healthy or available at the same time. So at this point, I'm leaning more so on what I saw during OTAs. And what I saw during OTAs is definitely they used that package. But then I was more intrigued of what happened when they went to the sub packages, right? And for the most part, what it was is Chandon Sullivan in the nickel. And I think that initially that's going to be your starting lineup, is Patrick Peterson, Levi Wallace, the two outside corners, either KZ or Neal as the strong safety, Minkah as the free safety, and Chandon Sullivan as the nickel. And then the really interesting thing becomes when they go to their three safety look, which is essentially what they call dime, and you take a linebacker off of the field. You've got KZ and Neal on there, and Neal is representing a linebacker. And that's when they put Joey Porter into the game. And I think that that's going to be where Joey Porter makes his mark first, is when they go into a sub package. Patrick Peterson, as he alluded to, is able to move around the defense, either moving into the nickel or moving back at some safety. That's, I think, when you're going to see Joey Porter Jr. So there were a lot of moving pieces and a lot of changes in the secondary. And unfortunately, they've been hit by injuries, so they have not been able to work with that core group. So really, after they break camp in those next couple weeks and those final two preseason games, I think that's when really the gelling is going to happen.
I agree with you. There's still work that needs to be done with this group. And Patrick Peterson, talking about their need to gel and come through in this situation. That was, I think, one of the biggest strengths coming out of OTAs and minicamp that I think the Steelers had something to look forward to, was the developing chemistry of so many veteran presences. I mean, we had a whole episode here where Minkah Fitzpatrick talked about the high level of connectivity between him and Patrick Peterson, the things that he can just say and look at him and they can just understand, hey, let's do this right now in this moment, because this is what we need to flip this play, disguise this package, and get this done. But I think that when you're looking at what the Steelers secondary is going to be this year, Patrick Peterson is going to be a moving piece as much as he has that tradition, like you talked about, and he talked about. As much as he's played on the outside in his career, he doesn't have the same pure speed that he came into the league with. He's winning more with his savvy, his experience, and his knowledge as a cornerback. And that's why the Steelers in practice are bumping him into the slot position. They're bumping him into the middle part of the formation so they can move him around and have him kind of disguised and maybe play a little bit of robber safety over the middle, or maybe drop back and help deep as a safety, or maybe play up at the line of scrimmage and just be a guy who's making plays around there. But to do that, it's going to take Joey Porter Jr. also being ready so that he can play on the outside, and they don't have to question him and Levi Wallace playing out there while Patrick Peterson is moved around. And we're going to talk more about the usage of how they're going to display that. But Mike, have you seen enough from Joey Porter Jr. that he should be given that chance to start on the outside, or are those things that you're going to be heavily watching in the next two preseason games?
Yeah, I think it's early still with him, and I'd like to see him do more to earn that. But I think what they're doing makes a lot of sense, where when they're in a base defense or they're in nickel, he's not on the field with the ones. But it's only when they go to that three safety look and Patrick Peterson moves from the outside into the nickel or another position that he gets his chance. And I feel like that's such a wise way to do it, because number one, I think that Levi Wallace has proven he's one of your best defensive backs. And I like the fact that he stays on the field. And I like the idea that you're not just giving everything to Joey Porter Jr. instantly. And let's say that he has some rough moments in a game and you feel like, maybe he's not quite ready. Taking him out of that lineup and going back to a regular nickel or going back to your base coverage is easier than it is if you give him the starting job and things aren't going well, and then you have to, change things up on the fly. So I think that what they're doing makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. It breaks Joey Porter Jr. in more slowly. It, as you mentioned, maybe hides some of Patrick Peterson's age and highlights his experience instead. And then there's just so much versatility to that defense once it is intact that I think it makes a lot of sense. So I think they're not quite there yet. We still have some preseason games to see where it takes us. But I like the direction it's headed, and I like their thinking right now in terms of where things are going.
I agree. There's flexibility in mind. There's things that are happening there, and a lot of excitement, I think, to kind of catalog as far as what we've seen leading into training camp from OTAs and mini camp. And then, of course, the potential that we've seen with these guys lining up. But like you pointed out, we still haven't really seen this group that much. Like they haven't started to come together. But in doing so, we've seen them late over the past week or so start to be playmakers in training camp and get a chance to make some stops. In fact, on Tuesday's practice, when they ended things with like 3 straight pass breakups where they kind of frustrated George Pickens and Deontay Johnson because the starters were in there, and they're like, yeah, it ain't so easy when we're on the field, is it? And I think it's been interesting to see that rivalry brew. I want to talk more about the secondary and how they plan to use them. We'll also get talk from Minkah Fitzpatrick, who spoke to us after Wednesday's practice, right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick with us. I'm Chris Carter. He's Mike DeFabo from The Athletic. We'll be right back talking about your Pittsburgh Steelers. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Mike, let's talk about this secondary a little bit more, because there's a lot of flexibility being talked about here. Peterson in the slot. Chandon Sullivan was signed to play in the slot. Elijah Riley has looked good in the slot in training camp as a depth piece who's come in there. So there's multiple answers there, but there's also the 3 safety look that we've been talking about, and that includes Minkah Fitzpatrick, Demonte KZ, and new free agent they brought in this year, Keanu Neal, who fits into that package. And so when you look at that, you can go dime and just play 6 defensive backs, but the Steelers are still trying to have their linebackers on the field at some point. They still want to have people who can get up there and stuff the run, and maybe just be using nickel a little bit more. But with nickel, you have your regular nickel package where you have 3 corners out there and one of them is your slot corner, or you have your big nickel package where you have 2 corners out there and that 5th defensive back between your 2 corners, your 2 safeties, is an extra safety who's a little bit stronger. And I think that's where Keanu Neal, if he was to be in that role, would play. But again, it comes down to chemistry. Here was Minkah Fitzpatrick and his perspective of where the secondary is when we were talking to him after Wednesday's practice.
It seemed like you guys were continue to take a little extended look at the 3 safety package with you, KZ, and Neal. What are you learning about what that grouping can do as you get Keanu up to speed a little bit?
It's just gaining the chemistry. Seeing what each guy could do. I mean, we have an idea of what everybody can do. We've all played ball for a long time, so now it's more so just creating a system where we all can play to our strengths. And I think the more reps we get at it, the better we'll be able to figure that out.
Patrick Peterson moves around a lot for you guys, outside, in the slot, moving around. What does that do for the versatility that you guys have as far as the chemistry and how you guys communicate?
Yeah, it just adds to it. I think something that if you're a Steelers defensive back, you're a guy that can move around. You know what I'm saying? There's not too many guys, at least since I've been here, that have just been static. You know what I'm saying? I think my first year or two, when I was still learning the system, was pretty static. But after me and Rel and Cam and all those guys started getting more reps together, we started becoming moving pieces, moving chess pieces, interchangeable chess pieces, which is rare in the secondary. So I think Pat just brings another layer to it. Obviously has his experience, which adds on top of his versatility. So it makes him easy to move around.
You have a lot of veterans in your secondary who are used to NFL communication speeds. How does Joey Porter Jr. do on the communication part when you guys are relaying signals around and keeping up with what you guys are saying?
We tell him what it is, and he says, "Yes, sir." That's about it. Yeah, no, it's when you're a young guy, everybody's been in that role. I've been in that role where the older guys communicate something, and that it is what it is. Usually, the communication comes from the safety or the nickel anyway. So, if a corner changes something, it's somebody like Pat P or somebody like Levi who has experience. You know what I'm saying?
So a few elements there, Mike, talking with Minkah Fitzpatrick there, their growth with the 3 safety formation and how they're trying to fit things in there. Talking about, they are raw because they still got to get used to each other. If you're the Steelers right now, Mike, do you have a preference for how you roll out your secondary if you're going nickel packages when you're starting to, you still want to defend the run, but you want to have another faster defender on the field to help against the pass? With the Steelers personnel, should they be focusing more on 3 safety formations, or should they be focusing on more traditional 3 cornerback formations?
Yeah, well, so far in camp, with the first team, have seen more of the traditional with Chandon Sullivan as the nickel, at least with the first team. But I think what you'll see is an evolution over the course of the season. And once Joey Porter Jr. is ready, then you'll see Patrick Peterson move in and be the nickel. And in that instance, like, he's both. He's a cornerback, but also there may be instances where he actually drops back and is a safety. So it's like it is a 3 safety package, but also it's not. And then in other instances, I think you'll have Keanu Neal as that box linebacker, hybrid safety, nickel, and it'll be a little bit of a bigger nickel type of look. So I think to answer your question, I think it depends on the point of the season that we're on, and also it depends on the opponent. And if you're playing the Bengals, or you're playing the Browns, or you're playing the Ravens, based on those teams and their strengths offensively, I think that more so is going to dictate the type of player that you're going to want in that situation.
I agree. This is going to become a package situation where the Steelers, one thing the Steelers will do when they're leading up to an opponent, they have their scout team offense run different things that they know the other team likes to run based off of their film study. They'll have certain players mimic what their future opponents are about to do as they study them, as they're working against them. But as the Steelers do that, they create these packages to help contain what the opponents do. For example, you go back to that Raiders game last year, they had a plan to take away Devontae Adams. You go back to the Dolphins game, they had a plan to limit Tyreek Hill. They have these plans, and you can add more and more layers to those plans to help disguise what you're doing. The more defensive backs you have available who can be out there, be part of your routine, be part of your system without becoming major liabilities. And I think that is the advantage here, is that you're not just getting one unit out there that if they don't work, it's done. That means the other team's figured them out and they're going to move around. You have 3 safeties, 3 corners. Maybe you bring out a 4th corner. Maybe you flex everything around. Maybe you change, you put Patrick Peterson out there and he plays like a safety while Keanu Neal jumps down into the box and he's more of like your slot guy, your big nickel in that situation. Those types of flexibilities offer you more options to say, hey, we're going to come up with this disguise, this package, this play over here. These are the things that we're going to do to counter these specific playmakers. And in today's passing NFL, it's so important. And like you said, it could be one plan for the Bengals with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and all the guys they got there. And it's going to be another plan when they face the Browns, when they lean on Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper and David Njoku and guys like that. These are different schemes, but I think, again, the more versatility, the more guys that they have that can play these different spots to what Minkah Fitzpatrick and Patrick Peterson are talking about, the better it'll be for Teryl Austin to draw these things up, for them to work on them in practice, and then to see results on the field.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing that I saw today, they were in dime. Okay. So in that instance, you've got Joey Porter Jr. on the outside, Levi Wallace on the outside, Patrick Peterson is the nickel. You've got Keanu Neal as the dime linebacker, and then KZ and Minkah as the safeties, if you're following all of that. Here's the point that I'm trying to make. Mm-hmm. They showed it was KZ and Minkah Fitzpatrick deep in what looked pre-snap like a 2-deep safety with those 2 guys. And then instead, it was Patrick Peterson and Keanu Neal that dropped back in with the 2 deep safeties. So imagine being a quarterback there and trying to sort through all of that, where you think you're used to looking at it and trying to decide, okay, they're showing two high safeties. Are they going to roll these safeties and it's going to really be 1 high? And instead, both the safeties you were looking at are now, neither of those are the 2 guys who are actually deep, and it's 2 completely different players who are the deep safeties. That's, I think, what's the genius of what the Steelers have created right now. You heard Minkah say chess pieces. I can't even count the number of times, the number of different people on the Steelers roster or coaching staff who have used that term. And I think that's exactly what you're going to have here, is you're just going to have defensive backs. And they're almost going to be positionless type of players in some instances that are going to have so many different roles and be in so many different places that, I mean, good luck if you're a quarterback trying to sort all of that pre-snap.
Right. I think that's the bottom line here, is they want to create those things. And we've talked about that a lot this offseason leading into training camp, was the different concepts that the Steelers secondary wants to throw out there. I think that as much as the ball skills play into it, as far as their ability to make plays in the football, being able to fool quarterbacks to make the throws that give you the chance to use your ball skills are just as a big a part of it. And that's why Teryl Austin's defensive coordinator, the former DB's coach, and that's one thing I think he did very well that Keith Butler wasn't as adept at doing when he was defensive coordinator. Butler was good at drawing up the blitz schemes and making sure, hey, we're going to find this way to get pressure here, there, and everywhere because I'm a linebackers coach. This is how I think. Teryl Austin still bring those pressures, but you know what we're going to do on the back end? We're going to be disguising all sorts of things. You're going to be thinking we're in cover 4 when we're in cover 2. Nope, we're in cover 1. We're tricking you here. You thought that the seam was open. Nope, we have a robber safety playing there because we have 3 robber safeties, and any one of them could be the robber, but you won't know until it's time. But you're too busy worrying about TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi and all those guys coming after you for you to be able to just stare down the defense and process it without having to deal with pressure. And that, like you said, that I think it could be the genius of this defense that does make it elite when they're challenging the passing game this year, and will come up. It could be the defining part that plays into several of their bigger games against passing offenses on their schedule.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost comical sometimes, and you'll have to wait until game day to see this, probably until like actually the regular season. But there are instances where Minkah, KZ, Neal, and Patrick Peterson are more or less like making a circle and specifically trying to mess with the quarterback where they're like rotating and moving and like more pronounced and more dramatic than what you would normally see with guys trying to disguise where they're actually going to be playing and where they're going to be breaking and what zone they have. And it's like, it's hilarious to watch. And I'm really, really interested to see how this ends up working out on game days, because it is very intriguing to watch at practice.
It certainly is. We got one more St. Vincent training camp practice to go that comes out today, Thursday, and they will practice there. And then they head back to the Southside facility for the rest of their practice before the season. But of course, they have their Saturday night game against the Buffalo Bills. We'll be getting you ready with that with Jenna Harner on the Friday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Mike, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. As always, let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I make it easy. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike DeFabo, and you can catch all of my work in The Athletic.
Absolutely. Check him out there. Check me out, Chris Carter, at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can read my work at post-gazette.com, covering all the things Pitt Athletic. You can also check out at Carter Critiques, where you can see my stuff from the Post-Gazette as well as the Locked On Steelers podcast. And you can find this show, the Locked On Steelers podcast, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. Back Friday, recapping the final day of Steelers training camp at St. Vincent College and getting you ready for their second preseason game. All here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast.